in response to the situation. For my part, I will not speak against Mr. Deevers' campaign. I don't think that's true. Even if abortion abolitionists will not reciprocate, I will welcome any of good who will work together to end abortion. But he's not. He his words don't match his actions because he donated against. That is speak. Okay. Sam.
Welcome to the Enemies Within the Church podcast. Here at the Enemies Within the Church podcast, we are excited to go and to expose, of course, those who are woke and to promote biblical principles. And you can find out more by going to EWTCnews.com. Once again, that's EWTCnews.com. And you can find all kinds of stories. And of course, you can find our podcast there. And if you go up to the top right side there, you can buy the documentary and you can watch Enemies Within the Church, where, of course, if you watch that, you will soon find the one, the only Kyle Whitt. How are you doing today, Kyle?
I'm doing pretty good today. I'm excited to be here as always. And, I just appreciate the opportunity that we have to discuss information that's impacting the church in this country and hopefully play a little role in strengthening the body of Christ, because that's what we're doing. We're not out here to tear down. We're out here to expose for the sake of building up. It's very much in alignment with things like 1st and 2nd Peter, which, called out issues, called out errors, warned against things, but it was for the purpose of what? To build up the household of God. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. I really like that. And, I'm feeling pretty good today because I think I got the abbreviation right, which is the first time that I've gotten the abbreviation right in the intro. So, the rest of this podcast might be terrible, but I got it right up there. And so I'm pretty excited about that. But no, I am really excited about what we're going to be diving in today because number one, it's an issue that I'm passionate about. It's somebody that I've never met Dusty in person, Pastor Dusty Deevers. I don't know. Have you met him in person?
I haven't met him in person, but I have talked to him on the phone before.
Yeah, but all of my interactions with Pastor Deevers is that he has just been really an upstanding guy, done some really great things, and really excited to go into to look at how we can build up the church by going and getting people excited about him. But unfortunately, we're going to be talking about him because of some things that some other people said about him and some other things that people have done towards him. But before we get into that, I just want us to look at the Enemies Within the Church podcast promise that we have. And do you want to just remind our listeners to what in the world that promise is?
So the EWTC News promise is that if you or your organization are ever mentioned on the website or in the podcast, that is an invitation to provide a statement, which we will run unaltered, have some form of conversation, or join us on the podcast. We are confident enough in our assertions to allow you the chance to challenge them and man enough to correct any details when we get them wrong. Don't expect there to be no disagreement, but agreement is not the basis for conversation. Honesty and respect are. We'll bring those two things on our end and hope you'll bring them as well. No gimmicks, no gotchas. We stick to the topic at hand and lay out our cases and disagreements.
Absolutely. And that's our promise. So specifically what's going to be extended here is that promise to allow Bart Barber to go and to make a comment or to come on. We'd love to have Bart Barber on. Of course, he is the president of the SBC. We'd love to have him on to go and to discuss a lot of the things that he said and a lot of the things that he's done. But specifically here, we're going to be looking at, well, what he did with Pastor Dusty Deevers and said about Pastor Dusty Deevers and how his words have been weaponized against Pastor Dusty Deevers. And you can find out a little bit more about this from our article. It's titled "A Cautionary Tale: SBC President's Attack on a Pastor Are Now Being Used by Leftists." And so, anything we need to say to kind of set the stage here?
Well, a couple of things I want to point out right off the bat, just so we're on the same page. One, I've actually already reached out multiple times to Bart to try and get commentary on the situation, clarity, commentary, see if he wants to come on. So we're not just making that promise idly. Two, uh, quickly, so Bart Barber is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest evangelical denomination in the world. Largest, obviously, in the United States, huge influence even outside of that. So this is kind of important. This is a big deal. Dusty Deevers is a pastor, and he's a pastor of a Southern Baptist church. So we're talking about the president of this denomination having a disagreement and engaging with a pastor within his denomination.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the context of it. And this story is going to start almost exactly a year ago, starts in September of last year. But obviously the situation now is, do you remember the district number that Dusty's running in? Because that's the other key important thing as we get started is Dusty is a Republican candidate for state Senate in Oklahoma. And he's running on a very, very absolute abolition of abortion platform. Like
Yes.
that is his basically explicit reason for going.
Right. Senate District 32 there in Oklahoma. And Dusty, just to kind of give a little bit of a background for Dusty, he has definitely stood up for I was going to say for abortion, but against abortion and for the preborn. Stood up there with a lot of guys down in Oklahoma, Kelly Green, Russell Hunter, a lot of those guys. He runs in that kind of a circle, very, very big on the abolitionist side of things. And this isn't the first time he's taken public heat. Phil Vischer, I believe is who it was, said that he shouldn't be a pastor. He's got a name that's more sounds like a country singer or something to that effect.
That's right. I had forgotten about that.
Because Dusty, in response, because you need to understand a little bit of who Dusty is. I mean, he's not just a boldly ferocious pastor who is standing for righteousness here. He responded by literally going and writing a country song and singing it for them, singing and playing it for him, and kind of in a fun, mocking way. But we did find out that actually he's not too bad of a musician either.
Yeah, no, he's definitely got more musical aptitude than I do.
Definitely more than me as well.
But yeah, he pulled it off, which was great.
Yeah. So this kind of started though back in September, and I think Bart and Dusty have probably sparred a little bit on social media before, if I remember. But this is really kind of where it took off.
The boiling over point,
right? And what did kind of what started this, if I remember right, was Dusty spoke out against the ERLC. Is that right?
Yeah. Why don't we just go ahead and get a little bit of this on the screen so you can follow along if you're watching us on YouTube, Rumble, if you're doing Spotify video. So, about pulling things up on screen, there was a little bit of an issue with the recording. It didn't actually get the screen sharing onto it. I apologize for that. You can go to EWTCnews.com, pull up the article. Everything I'm referring to will be right there. Thank you. You can see this, but we're going to be, saying everything out loud. So if you're listening to us on audio, we'll be describing everything. And if you want to see what we're describing, well, you can go to EWTCnews.com. But so we got got the article up here, and you can see right here Dusty's initial comment. This was the comment that triggered things. And it was in response to, if you watched our last episode, you'll recognize Brent Leatherwood, the president of the ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And this was in response to him being made president. Dusty says, in Louisiana this spring and at SBC annual meeting this summer, Brent Leatherwood sided against the innocent preborn. Now he leads the ethics and policy arm of the SBC. We glory in our shame. Now, if you want to understand the background of that, again, go watch our previous episode on the amendment that passed in Ohio that also, second half of that episode, focused in on Brent Leatherwood. But Sam, I mean, they can see it on the screen if they're already looking. How did Bart respond to this? I mean, he put a whole thread, but there's a quote that's now become was the subject of much controversy then, and is now reemerged as the subject of controversy. But how does Bart respond to this?
Well, let me go ahead and read it here for you guys. He says this: they can oppose the value them both amendment in Kansas and claim the high road in doing so, but anyone who opposes their poorly written legislative efforts, they will accuse of being against the innocent preborn. How? Why? Because unless you 100% agree with every jot and tittle of Deevers' obsession with sending 16-year-old girls to prison for succumbing to the coercion of their parents to have an abortion, he will label you against the innocent preborn. Wow. Those are some strong words right there.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, they are.
You know, basically what Bart is accusing Dusty of is going in, and just so you guys can understand this amendment here, it's really an equal protection amendment, and it's understanding that the child inside the womb has an equal protection as somebody who would be outside the womb, and therefore would have equal rights. And this is the type of amendment, that would be being presented. And so the concept here is going and saying that if you were to go and have your arms and legs ripped off and your skull crushed by someone, that person who does that to you would be charged with murder. And anybody who would be a conspirator in making that happen to you would also be charged under the law. And so that's what an equal protection thing would be, is it's actually recognizing the personhood of the child in the womb. And this is important. We can go into more detail about this, but later on in the podcast, but this is kind of important to understand. This is what Bart is criticizing. And then he goes and he says, because you're for equal protection, you're actually just obsessed with, how did he say it? You're obsessed with sending 16-year-old girls to prison for succumbing to coercion of their parents to have an abortion. And then if you're not going to go with that, he would go and say, he's saying that Dusty would go and say that you're not for the preborn, you're against the innocent preborn. Kyle, there's all kinds of problems that I see in this. First of all, let's just, can we just talk about the integrity of the accusation itself? Let's just say that this would maybe be kind of true. Okay. The equal protection aspect of this would be against coercion. Like, he's not understanding the amendment, or he's completely going against it. Like, that's first of all, it's goofiness. That's not at all what the equal protection thing would be going and saying. If somebody would be coerced, then they're not guilty. Like, it's somebody else is making them do it.
And I should interject quick. Coercion, we're talking legal, not casual speech, because casual speech, coercion could mean someone putting some peer pressure on you.
Right.
But legally, coercion is a higher standard than someone just putting a little bit of peer pressure on you.
Right. And he's
It's the
clearly
same thing.
speaking in legal terms too.
Yes.
But what are
actually, I think he's leaving it intentionally vague, but that's a little bit more of a kind of deeper examination of it.
Yeah.
But let's just leave it in he's making it on a legal grounds right now. What how the law would look at it.
What else do you see that's wrong with this? Because I can think of a lot of things, but what do you see what's wrong here with what Bart's saying?
Well, you edged right up to it, but I want to take it to the next step of it's 100% a straw man. And we really have to tear this comment apart before we can get into the modern situation, because understanding why it's so problematic will lead to why the situation now is 10 times more problematic. Right. But it's 100% a straw man. No one, and people at the time, you can go to it, go to EWTC News, go to the article name, if we haven't already mentioned it, A Cautionary Tale, SBC President's Attacks on a Pastor Are Now Being Used by Leftists. And that has the tweet. You can go from there. It links to the whole thing. We want to document everything. This entire article is essentially just Bart's words, put out there for you to examine. But, you can go read the replies. Everyone's like, who's saying this? Who is saying that someone who was actually forced? Because again, let's use what the common language term would be for what legally we're talking about in coercion. Someone that was forced to get an abortion. So it's a complete straw man. But beyond that, it's appealing to sympathy. It's not a 45-year-old woman that's on her sixth marriage and whatever it is, trying to, I guess I'm making someone that's less sympathetic. Depending on your view of things, that would be someone who's just as sympathetic. I'm just trying to say he picked someone who we generally put into the category of a more sympathetic person, a 16-year-old girl, as opposed to someone who's middle-aged and who's had a little bit of a rougher life. He used a sympathetic. So those are the two things I kind of want to point out before I toss it back to you. And Sam, when I toss it back to you, I want you to clarify something for the audience.
All right. What's that?
I want you to clarify because the term pro-life is going to get thrown out there a bunch once we get into the middle of this. Bart names his position, and Bart names the position of Dusty. He'll later drop one of those two terms. And again, that's kind of an intentional thing to discredit Dusty. But can you define for me Bart's position of incrementalism and Dusty's position of abolition? What are those two things? And also, how does that play into Bart's comment here?
Yeah, so that's actually a really important thing to clarify, because most people who are going to be listening to the podcast, because most people out there probably don't understand the difference between pro-life and abolition. And this is where a lot of times people end up getting into problems with getting tricked by politicians. Not that you can't be tricked on the other side as well, but a lot of times you go and you say, look, I'm against abortion. Abortion is murder. This is what I've been taught. This is what is found on God's word. This is where I stand. And then you hear somebody get up and they say, I'm pro-life. And then you go and you follow them, and then you come to find out that, my goodness, they just never get rid of abortion. Why don't they ever get rid of abortion? It's always just, let's try this, let's try that, let's try this. But they never just try to say, let's just say no more abortion. Let's just do that. Like they never come out that. It's like, hey, let's make sure that they have to get an ultrasound if they're going to get an abortion. Aha. Well, how about we just say there's no abortion? Like, no, don't do it. It's wrong. And that's the thing of being pro-life in this sense. When you're dividing
in the incremental sense.
In the incremental sense of going and dividing between pro-life or incrementalism and abolitionism, that pro-life or incrementalism is the concept of going and saying, we're never going to start from the premise that abortion is murder and therefore we're going to say no to it. We're going to start from the premise by going and saying, what would be the most pragmatic way to take away some abortions? And eventually, I'll give it this, in the best sense of it, they'll go and they'll say, eventually we want to eliminate all abortions because it is murder. But instead of starting from the premise that it's murder and saying, let's just not do it, they're going to go and start moving slowly backwards. Abolitionism says abortions is murder. We're not going to do it. There's also another big key component here. And this is where Bart is kind of pushing on this. And that is abolitionism, generally speaking, actually believes that it's murder. Abortion is murder. And so therefore, there is a penalty for those who commit murder. Incrementalism, a lot of times, so an example would be the heartbeat bill that just passed in Iowa a couple of months ago. There is basically zero repercussions upon even doctors for committing abortion and murdering a child. And so not only do you have a heartbeat, and it's not like there is still a time when it's okay to murder somebody, but even if you do it, it's like, not a big deal. Or at worst, the Iowa Board of Medicine can go and give you a fine. And by the way, the chief person in the Iowa Board of Medicine, former Planned Parenthood director.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's funny how that always works like that.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? But those are kind of the big differences between abolitionism. So if I just sum it up, because I probably use too many words here. Abolitionism is that abortion is murder and it's never okay to abort a baby, and anybody who murders a child is going to go and to be held accountable for that murder. Incrementalism, often just generally used as pro-life, is the idea of it starts in a pragmatic premise. How can we limit the most abortions? And we're not going to put penalties on those who commit abortions because we don't want to hurt their feelings. We want to love them to Jesus is kind of what they'll say.
Yeah. And for the, couple people that are going to point this out, because Bart brings this up and weaponized it, although this is a kind of going into the larger conversation that was had between him and Dusty. And I use conversation very loosely. One of Bart's justifications for this line of reasoning is that they're so extreme that they want to penalize someone for having an ectopic pregnancy, and Dusty himself even responded to that and called out the straw man there. It's like, that's a medical tragedy, and medicine already has a understanding of how to handle abnormal situations. The question is, in a normal situation, is abortion ever not just ever okay, ever an option? And it's no, it's never even an option to consider.
Right.
And when you have something like an ectopic pregnancy and there is no way to save the pregnancy, I mean, that's not abortion. Not in the sense that we commonly use the term. again, yeah, that's a medical tragedy, but don't use that as a straw man to try and say, and that's why we can't treat abortion as murder and have
Right.
equal protection for the unborn. And we can't just make a bill right now that says abortion is murder, um, therefore no abortion.
Right. And just to
It's a silly.
clarify, just to clarify too a little bit on the ectopic pregnancy, because in going and looking at this, what's generally viewed as an ectopic pregnancy is referred to as a fallopian tube ectopic pregnancy, where the egg is actually in the tube, the fertilized egg there is in the fallopian tube, and then it goes and it bursts. Number one, a lot of the time when you find out, it's after the child has already died with an ectopic pregnancy, and so
Yes.
therefore it's really well, it's not an abortion. It's a medical procedure to go into save the lady's life, the woman's life, and of course, it is removing someone who has already died from the body. That's not an abortion.
It falls right
Interestingly,
into the same category of miscarriages.
right. Interestingly, though, a lot of uh, liberals, leftists, woke, secular, however you want to go and categorize this, they bring that exact argument up that Bart Barber is using with miscarriages. They bring that exact argument up with after a miscarriage, a DNC procedure that would happen to go and to remove the child after the miscarriage. They'll go and they'll bring that up and say, "Look, you're saying that you don't, you know, that a miscarriage is an abortion. That's not the same thing. It's a complete straw man in going and looking at that." I do want to reference, even though it is an unpopular thing to say with ectopic pregnancies, because I've already said this with that most of the time the normative that we're talking about is the fallopian tube ectopic pregnancy. There is at least two ectopic pregnancies that have survived, but it was extremely special circumstances, and it was not inside the fallopian tube. It was outside of the fallopian tube, and an ectopic just means outside of the womb, and so it can be used as a broader term than that. But most of the time, we're talking about a fallopian tube ectopic pregnancy. When looking at this, that's what most
Hmm.
people think of. They're extremely rare anyway, but then it's even rarer to be extremely
Yes.
rare to be outside of that. But that other side is a completely different category, and there's a lot of other factors. But generally speaking, an ectopic pregnancy, there is the child has already passed away.
Yeah, there's no survivability chance for the child.
Right.
And if for some reason there's a whole rabbit trail that we can go down there, but we don't need to. It's just the point of it's a massive, massive straw man to go down that route. But the point of bringing all this up is to set up the degree of a straw man, the degree of emotional manipulation, the degree of just flat out misrepresentation that Bart is going to.
Right.
Now, we need to cover something very important about this. Okay, don't have that one there, but here we go. Bart apologized
Yeah.
for what he said. Specifically, I want to point out he apologized for this comment, the comment about uh, Deevers being obsessed with sending 16-year-olds to prison. Just let me read the apology. And Sam, I want you to not just comment on this, but tell me from a biblical standpoint, because we don't care about apologies, we care about repentance. From
Right.
biblical standpoint, is there repentance within this? And also just examine the comments for themselves. A little more than a month ago, I used the word obsessed to describe Dusty Deevers' approach to abortion law, specifically with regards to coerced minors. The word obsession not only assumes motivation, but also implies something bordering upon mental instability. It's an inflammatory and accusatory word. What makes it worse is that I did it intentionally because I was angry at Deevers' unwarranted and unprovoked attacks against Brent Leatherwood. In my anger, I sought to match Deevers' own hyperbolic incivility. But my actual job is not to mimic Deevers' hyperbolic incivility. My actual job is to imitate Christ's gracious truth-telling. And I know everyone, and then he just starts rambling about how everyone moved past that. Anyone watching on video, yes, that is a comment from me saying sorry, not sorry. Now, the final piece of context, and then go for it, Sam, is though Bart said all this, he did not take down the previous tweet. He did not take down the tweet he's apologizing for. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So the first big issue with this, and this is, I don't even know if I want to say it's the main issue because like there's a lot of issues here, but he's apologizing. He says, I repent of that, but he's repenting from using the word obsession. He's not actually backing off of anything that he actually inferred other than that Dusty was obsessed with it. So he's still going to go and say, like, I'm doubling down on the fact that I believe that Dusty wants 16-year-old girls who are coerced into an abortion to go to prison or to go to jail. And so he's not backing off of what he said. He's not backing off of that he made a straw man. He's saying, okay, Dusty maybe doesn't think about it all day. That's what Bart is going and saying. Like, okay, maybe Dusty thinks about writing country songs once in a while too. And it's not just always thinking about sending 16-year-old girls to jail. You know, maybe that's what he does. That's what Bart is apologizing for. That's what he's repenting of, is just saying that that word obsession. That's not the right thing. That he missed what he got wrong. Obsession, the fact that he said Dusty was obsessed with it was not the most heinous thing that he said. It wasn't the most grievous thing that he said. The other problem when you go and you look at, a lot of the other problems that you see with what he goes and he says is then he starts talking about how I was so angry. I had all this anger and I just want to have, a truth telling like Jesus. That's really my goal, a gracious truth telling. But I was just so angry about all of this. He's angry about somebody who wants to end abortion. That's what he's angry about. Just stop and think about that. Now he's going and saying, look, I'm angry because Dusty said mean things about my buddy, Brent Leatherwood. That's really what he's going and saying there. But this is absolutely ridiculous. It's not righteous anger. It's not good.
Let me
anger.
just to refresh people. Let me read Deevers' hyperbolic incivil comment.
Yeah,
that Bart was trying to match. In Louisiana this spring, at SBC annual meeting this year, Brent Leatherwood sided against the innocent preborn. Now he heads the ethics and policy arm of the SBC. We glory in our shame.
Yeah. So the only thing he said that, is that Brent Leatherwood sided against the innocent preborn. Brent Leatherwood helped kill a bill in Louisiana that ended up killing many more children by going and stopping an abolish abortion bill. That's what he did.
Yep.
That's
a true abolishing of abortion bill. As far as I know, that's the only true bill in this country that was ever presented in this country that made it as far as it did, at least. That was a legitimate end of abortion in the state.
Yeah.
All the other ones have, massive exceptions.
I think
that I'm aware of, at least.
I think there's been a good one that was presented in Oklahoma, but it was killed before this one. This one made the furthest. Is this one in Louisiana? Yeah. And it, you just go and you look at this kind of stuff, and it's an inconvenient truth. if you're an SBC talking head, it's a very inconvenient truth that the guy that you just made president of the ERLC is, he sided against the preborn. But it's true.
Yeah.
And even if Bart was sitting out here,
if Bart wants to make a justification for why he did, that's another thing. But you can't argue that in the end, the bill, they didn't amend it. It just went away.
Right.
It was
the bill
fully
died.
Killed.
The bill died.
Now they, later they made a new bill, a much weaker one, but they did make a new one. But Bart has to own up to that. So I don't get how. Anyway, it's just silly to call to match Bart's comment up with Dusty's comment and say, yes, these two are equal, no matter what side you're on.
Right. It's an unjust scale.
Yeah.
And then the thing is that you mentioned he didn't delete that tweet. And
which is absolutely critical for the story going forward.
Yeah. And it wasn't a true recanting of the tweet. It was really a recanting of one word, the word obsession. And that's important because, Baptist News Global ended up picking up the quote, and they labeled Dusty as an ultra conservative pastor with extreme anti-abortion views, and then are leaning on the SBC president in order to back up that statement that they made about Pastor Deevers.
Mm-hmm.
And then
now we get to that Baptist News Global article dropped on October in October of this year, and then things really get wild.
Yeah. So
because
what happens next, Kyle?
Well, so Deevers' Democrat opponent, who knows he's in a race that he's going to lose. This is one of those absolute dead red lock seats. And at least from everything I understand. So he's doing one of those, okay, I got to pull out all the stops to see what I can do to discredit. Well, he sends out a mailer that, has a quote from Baptist News Global. They misspell Bart Barber. They spell it Bart Barber. Kind of a little funny thing. That includes the line, Deevers' obsession with sending 16-year-old girls to prison for succumbing to the coercion of their parents. And then it highlights, wow, look how extreme. I mean, it literally says, he is way, way, way too extreme. That's a lot of ways.
Way. And so this is a huge thing because think about this, a Democrat political opponent is using Baptist News Global and the sitting, not just a former SBC president, the sitting SBC president to go and to attack a SBC pastor in a state Senate seat that the SBC president doesn't even live in. But the interesting thing about this is because we thought, man, this is huge news. When I heard this, I mean, I'm like, this is big news. I cannot believe an SBC president. But the crazy thing, it's crazy. It gets worse.
Yeah, this is where it kind of went above and beyond, over the top, to where it went, okay, we need to highlight this in a podcast episode, especially if you're a Southern Baptist. You need to know about this because this is really the moment where it went from a big problem to true scandal.
Mm-hmm.
And Bart has just amplified that to the nth degree. But what did it come out? What came out about what Bart did? How far his obsession, and I think in this case that word is apt, with attacking Deevers goes.
Yeah, I mean, so it went so far that Bart went and actually gave a donation to Deevers' primary opponent. Not, I mean, there were several primary opponents there, but one of Deevers' primary opponents. And remember, Bart,
The only opponent that had a reasonable chance of the only competition, really.
In remember here, Bart doesn't live in Senate District 32. Bart doesn't live in the state of Oklahoma. So this is out-of-state money that he's giving to go against the person who has a chance to beat Dusty Deevers. And by the way, I looked up on Ballotpedia just quickly here the how red this district is. And the last race, the Republican won, I believe it was 67% of the vote. And then the time before that, it was 55%. So like it wouldn't be impossible for a Democrat to win, but it would be impossible for a Democrat to win, politically speaking. Like that'd be an insane David and Goliath type of a thing. This is a red district. And that's important because that means the real race happens in the primary. How far away does Bart Barber live?
Roughly 150 miles from that district.
Yeah, so he lives 150 miles.
So it's not like he's not living like here in Wichita Falls, which is just over the border from the district. I don't know the exact borders of the district, but I know it goes around the Lawton area. I don't know if it goes all the way down to the border, but
so
it's not like he's right there. He's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah. Now, this is the interesting thing about this. I've been around politics quite a bit. Been around state politics specifically quite a bit. And I can tell you that I've never seen anybody donate to someone who is out of state, or they're out of state donating to somebody else in a different state, unless it's because they are behind a singular issue. That's the only reason. Now, the singular issue might be the opponent that they're going against, or it could be that they're saying, hey, I am really, really, really for this cause, and I think that you could help spark this in a really a nationwide type thing. Well, what would be the two things here? What would be the opponent? Well, the opponent would be, I hate Dusty Deevers so much, I want to see him lose, and so I'm giving money to his opponent. And the other one that you could say is that I hate abolishing abortion so much that I'm going to give money to someone else because I am for incrementalism. And this would be terrible, terrible for incrementalism for an abolitionist like Dusty Deevers to get into the Oklahoma Senate.
Yeah, I'm going to say something. A lot of incrementalists. Now, you can be someone who says, okay, hey, it's good that the Dobbs decision came out. It's good that, which actually there's some problems in the wording of that decision, but that's a whole nother thing. But you can say it's good that the bad legal precedent of Roe v. Wade is shut down. That's fine. That's different than incrementalism. And it's different specifically than the type of incrementalism that someone like Bart is pushing. Because if you are an incrementalist, a true incrementalist, as in, I want to see abortion completely ended, but I think the strategy is incremental change. Well, what's your end goal? The total abolition of abortion. You are a long-term abolitionist. If you want to, that's a bad way to phrase it, but I'm just saying that it is. But if you are many times incrementalists fight against abolition. In this case, that's what Sam is saying. Sam is saying that one of the only two options is that Bart is so against abolition, that he's going to support a candidate that aligns with his value of incrementalism.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, what is he against? He's not a long-term abolitionist. He doesn't want to see the total end of abortion in function. Even if he says that in word, in function, he doesn't want to see that. So again, it leaves concerning options about why Bart would do this.
Right. And I just want to talk just a little bit here about how silly it is if you believe that you can abolish abortion through incrementalism, and you're against abolitionism. Let me just point out how silly this is. Okay, if you're an incrementalist, that essentially just means you're saying, I'm willing to compromise on this issue. Let's just go ahead and say that's okay. I'm an abolitionist, so I'm not necessarily saying that I'm saying it's okay, but let's just accept that premise here for a moment. If you're going to compromise, doesn't it make sense to start your compromise with the most you could possibly get as opposed to the least you could possibly get and then have to compromise from that position? Like, if you're going to have to compromise, take as much ground as you possibly can and see how much they will give you. Don't go and say, I'm going to guess that you're okay with me saying you have to get an ultrasound before you murder your baby.
Yeah.
And then we'll take it further next term. That's just a strategic
it's work from 100. Yeah, it's work from 100, not work from 0.
Right.
You go from 100 and you pull back to see where the level is, and then you build up from there. You don't start at 0 and go, okay, let's give them everything. Let's give them almost everything. But
I point this out,
again,
Kyle,
but the point of saying all that.
Well, yeah. So the reason I point this out too is because if you go and you hear what we're saying, because we're not going super in depth in abolitionism versus pro-life or incrementalism, and you go and you take this to somebody who knows pro-life, if you know incrementalism, they're going to go and they're going to say, we're doing this strategic. Those guys aren't doing it strategic. Simple logic would dictate they're not being strategic. They're actually, doing the dumbest thing possible.
If they're behaving the way that Bart is behaving, if they're behaving the way that people in Iowa behaved, I did it again. So I'm talking to you. I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
And I go to say Ohio, and it comes out
wrong.
as
you're
Iowa.
Not wrong with Iowa either. So I was like, true. Well, yeah.
And
fair enough.
So yeah,
fair enough.
he donated money out of state to a obscure state Senate race that there's no way he's going to know about outside of the fact that Dusty is there. And if he's going to know about it outside of, if he's going to know about that for some other reason, he's also going to know that Dusty's there. So either he went out of his way to attack Dusty, or he went out of his way to donate, but also knew that Dusty was there, which compromises his donation. So either it's a compromised donation or it's an explicit attack.
Right.
Either way, it's an attack. It's a problem. Now, Bart has said some things.
Yes, he has.
Well, we got one right here in response to the situation. For my part, I will not speak against Mr. Deevers' campaign. I don't think that's true. Even if abortion abolitionists will not reciprocate, I will welcome any of good who will work together to end abortion. But he's not. His words don't match his actions because he donated against. That is speak. Okay. Sam, if you donate to an opponent in a political race, is that donation neutral, or does that donation speak to the person's campaign?
It speaks to the campaign. You probably could make an argument that you're saying, I'm not saying anything negative about any of these other people. I just think this person's the best. but I would vote for any of them. You could make that kind of an argument. The problem is that you already have spoken against Dusty's name by saying that he was obsessed with sending 16-year-old girls who were coerced to go and to murder their baby to jail. You've already said that, Bart. You've already spoken against the name of Dusty and said, well, the only thing I'm going to repent of is that I said the word obsessed, and used the word obsession. But the other problem is that these two candidates. Like, okay, I am a political, I really like political stuff. Okay, I'm kind of a political nerd. The only reason I knew anything about the Senate district race is because of Dusty Deevers running for it. I could tell you zero things about other Oklahoma Senate district races. I could tell you zero things about Oklahoma House district races. I could maybe find some stuff out quickly about them, but off the top of my head, I don't know any of those things. It would be really weird if Bart was like, I really care about politics in Oklahoma Senate District number 32, being that he lives 150 miles away. Think about this. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, no, I don't believe that. Who's your state senator? Most of you can't tell me. Who's your state House representative? Most of you can't tell me. And you're trying to tell me that Bart Barber was going like, I really care about this one. That's not true. It's just not true. He cared about hurting Dusty.
Yeah, and Bart he's not a megachurch pastor. He pastors in a very, very small town in a very reasonable sized church, still larger than, the average, because the average church size is only about 70. He's not flush with cash. He's not, a political donator going all over the place. And he himself even clarified that. So this was a targeted donation, not a general donation.
Well,
it's a bit of a problem. Let's read some comments. Let's read some comments from Bart about the situation. So he posted on Twitter an open letter. I don't know if he was just putting it on Twitter or if he actually sent the letter, but it was sent to the Lawton Constitution newspaper there in Lawton. And it says, part of it says at least, that is why I was so shocked to see online reports that Larry Bush, a candidate from Oklahoma State Senate District 32, had used my likeness, my name, my words, and my position as the president of the Southern Baptist Convention in an attack ad against his Republican opponent in the election. He did so not only without my consent, but also without even extending me the courtesy of letting me know that he was planning to use me in his campaign in any way. Dude, you're a public figure. Your words are publicly out there. There's no protection on that. He doesn't have to extend any of that. Like, he can just pull those words. That's fine. But continuing on, let me be clear. The Southern Baptist Convention does not endorse electoral candidates. I don't think that's historically completely accurate, but continuing. The president of the Southern Baptist Convention does not endorse candidates. My differences with his opponent, with Deevers, about religious liberty notwithstanding, I deeply resent Mr. Bush's decision to use my likeness and my words in an effort to debase further our political process, and I would never have given my consent to being used in an attack ad. The remarks Mr. Bush used were made long ago. Ironically, I came to that testy exchange online because I was seeking to defend conservative, pro-life Southern Baptists against slanderous, negative attacks online. Oh boy.
I just to point out a couple of things, because this is a lot. First of all, he says the Southern Baptist president doesn't endorse someone. He's trying to divorce himself from his position. And you can't really do that. You could go and say, of course, the organization isn't endorsing him. I don't have the power to make an organization endorse him. But when Bart Barber endorses somebody, it would be the Southern Baptist president endorsing someone, just to point that out. You can't divorce your position from who you are in that sense when you're making a public statement like that. The next thing to go and to look at
Yes.
this, though, is that I don't know if we got to the part where he goes and he says that this is taken out of context. This is taken out of context. It actually wasn't taken out of context. The reality of it is that Senate District 32, if a Democrat is going to win, it is going to be solely on the basis of going and saying Dusty Deevers is somebody who is obsessed with throwing 16-year-olds in jail. Because
not only that, it's going to be, hey, the head of his denomination
even says
thinks that he's a crazy man.
Right. And that's the only way that they're going to win. And the issue is going to be on abortion and specifically on equal protection, if somebody should be punished or not for murdering a child. But then the absurdity.
Bart needed to be a man. Bart needed to be a man and come out and go, wow, it's really dumb that I, as a public figure, as president of the Southern Baptist Convention, these comments were made while he was still president of the Southern Baptist Convention.
And they weren't made that long ago, like he says. It was made like a couple months ago.
No, it was made last year.
Okay.
Last
a year ago.
September of 22, and now we're in November of 23.
Yeah. But that
was just a year ago.
A year ago.
It was in the context of the Southern Baptist president attacking a Southern Baptist pastor. He didn't take a neutral stand there. The president of the SBC was willing to attack a pastor on Twitter. If Bart was truly repentant of those comments, he would have been, wow, it was really dumb of me to leave these up. Now they're being used against someone who I supposedly have no issue with politically, besides some backroom disagreements. Wow, I needed to have taken those down. I need to not only send a letter talking about this, but say how those comments were inappropriate and I never should have made them. But no, he doesn't do that.
Right.
In fact, he donates to Dusty's political opponent in the primary. Not the Democrat opponent in the general, but one of the Republican opponents in the primary. So his comments here in this open letter they contradict his actions. His comments about not endorsing candidates contradict that action. But Sam, because people have said this over and over again, well, how do we know that was the same Bart Barber that donated to this opponent's campaign? How do we know that wasn't someone doing it in his name? Which it's really hard to do that. But Bart, in his own words, in response to this situation, he confirmed multiple times, multiple ways. But I want to point out this one where someone was pointing out essentially what we're pointing out of Bart made a legal contribution against a Christian, pro-life, pro-family Southern Baptist pastor. That's a question that needs to be answered. Bart's response was, no, I made a legal contribution for a Baptist pro-life physician. Bart, you just agreed with what the man said. You just stated the positive side of what he said in the negative. That's like saying 2 + 2 = 4, and you saying, nuh-uh, 4 - 2 = 2. I don't get it. So let's go back. What did Bart say? The Southern Baptist president of the Southern Baptist Convention does not endorse candidates. I made a legal contribution. Okay, which is it, Bart? Yeah. Do you not endorse candidates, or do you just endorse candidates?
Yeah.
Are you saying it's okay because it wasn't from the platform?
Yeah. Well, so you could make the argument, if I'm playing, Bart Barber's advocate here, you could make the argument that a contribution is not as strong as an endorsement, which is true, especially with $100 wouldn't have gone as far as Bart coming out and saying, I endorse this candidate as the president of the Southern Baptist Convention. That's true, but it's also equally true that you only gave money to one of these candidates, and you seem to really go out of your way to donate to this candidate. And that kind of basically says, I'm behind this candidate. Now, it might not have publicly stated that until this came to light, but now we all know who you were behind, Bart.
Well, yeah, and when it came to light, he's refused to elaborate on why. People asked, I mean, you can see part of the top comment. What motivated you to make the contribution in that particular race at that particular time? These are the questions he needs to answer.
Right.
But he's not answering them. And let's read one more thing from him, and then we'll kind of start to put a bow on this. So this is, again, in response to this. So let's read the context. Talking to Bart, perhaps you can clear up any misunderstandings in this discussion. Of all the political races in all of the country, can you tell us why you chose to donate to this one against an SBC pastor? Well, Dennis, I face a conundrum here along several lines. So first, he's already ignoring the question.
Right.
Number one, Dusty is now the only pro-life conservative candidate in the race. Now, Sam.
Yeah.
Has Bart already clarified that in his view, Dusty is not pro-life?
Yes. Yes. He is clear.
Yes. Okay. So that's...
And also, just for a little bit of context, I'll be really brief on this. It's not this way across the rest of the country, generally speaking, but in Oklahoma, this debate has gone so far, pro-life versus abolitionism, that there actually is a big distinguishing line in that terminology. And Bart certainly is aware of it.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. It's kind of ground zero for the split between the incremental movement and some of the other. There's technically more versions of pro-life than just incremental and abolition.
You got smash mouth incrementalism, don't you know?
Well, you got the whole life pro-life.
True.
And then some other minor variations. But ground zero for the split between incremental, which have taken the name pro-life with them, and abolition is kind of Oklahoma. So that is, honestly, it's a little bit of a slap in the face. And I feel like Bart would know, because he's already made the distinction and he's already kind of ostracized abolitionists as not part of pro-life. So that's weird. But continue on. I would vote for him in the general election. Pure conjecture. Like, we have no idea. The well's been tainted, so there's no point of even saying that because you can't prove it. But continuing, I don't want to enter a conversation that might lead to negative statements about his candidacy. I would vote for him, but I have such negative feelings about him, I can't discuss it any further, or else I will speak ill of his campaign. I thought...
Which so is apparently when Bart said
he's not going to speak... Exactly. But apparently when Bart said he won't speak ill against his campaign, he meant the... if you're... my mom told me if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything nice at all.
Or no offense, but let me tell you how I'm going to offend you.
Yeah. You're revealing your position. But continue on, too. I'm not at all the first SBC president to make a political contribution. I don't think that holding office in the SBC strips anyone of their rights as a citizen. Well, so which is it, Bart? He's really playing this word game of, well, I'm neutral. I'm not going to endorse a candidate, but I have this right that I'm not laying aside to financially endorse candidates.
Well, it's sidestepping the question.
Our campaign contribution, as we've already found out, so we know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, Sam. are campaign contributions private?
No.
So when you do that, is that a public endorsement, even if it's a quieter public endorsement?
To a degree. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's
get
not the
around
full
that fact.
Yeah. I mean, now he could have given $100
the same thing as blasting it on Twitter.
Yeah. Now he could have given $100 simultaneously to both candidates. Now he didn't do that, but you could have done that kind of a thing, and claim you're not necessarily endorsing one over the other, but you're endorsing two above the rest. Where you can't really, I mean, you could do that with your voice, but that'd be just kind of a weird position. But Kyle, this is completely sidestepping the question for him, because this isn't about if you can make a financial contribution. The guy who asked the question wasn't asking that. He fully recognized it, fully assumed you could. His question was, why this one? Why this race?
Yep. Yeah. Why did you choose this place, this time to donate? And when he knew that this donation, which again is not private, so, and as the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, people are going to find these kinds of things out. Why did you do it?
There's no answer.
And he's not answering. Yeah, there's no answer. Which is, again, going back to this point, Bart, we want you to contact us. We would, if you want to clarify those things, we will post them. We will have a conversation with you. We will do a podcast with you. But I can't see a way to square the circle.
Right.
And the fact that you're dodging it amplifies that even more. Amplifies it to just a massive degree. Why is the Southern Baptist Convention's president continuously, as I said, I'm not afraid to use the word, obsessively going after Deevers? Why is he going after a member of his denomination? Why is he going after a fellow pastor like this? There's just no explanation that I can contrive in my mind that answers why he would do this.
Well,
it just displays an unrepentant heart, a heart that does not want to let go of the anger he clarified, not me, he himself said that he has towards Dusty. Right. He said that he has anger, and in this case, I'm going to add a context to it. This is proving that he's harboring that anger. I don't see another way to explain it other than to use Bart's words, the points he gave us, to clarify it in that way.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing that comes to my mind is, and it's kind of a sad thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Apparently, the 11th commandment applies to an awful lot of things, but murdering babies, it doesn't apply to. The 11th commandment is don't speak against a Southern Baptist if you're a Southern Baptist. But apparently that rules all off when it comes to making sure that you can murder the preborn. That's what Bart Barber's proving here. And that's really sad.
Which we didn't even get into a lot. There's so many other details about this. Like, if we want to talk about campaign donations, the one that the pro-life physician that Bart donated to has donated $1,000 to a Democrat who was pro-abortion.
Right.
Yeah. And other things that question her pro-life credentials, even for an incrementalist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, we probably don't have time to get into all that, but we do want to hear from you guys if there's anything that sparked interest to you in this episode, and I'm sure there was, because there's a lot that we covered, and we touched on some pretty touchy terrain. Go ahead and email us at contactwokepedia@gmail.com. Once again, that's contactwokepedia@gmail.com. And we do want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on abolitionism versus incrementalism? Let's fill our email up because I'm sure Kyle wants to get about 10,000 emails on abolitionism versus incrementalism. Just trying to help you out there, guy. And go ahead and
I mean,
email
it's a
us,
way to
though.
get engagement, but you're just going to eat up all my time responding to those
Yep.
emails, aren't you?
That's right. That's right. Actually, I would love to respond to your emails on incrementalism versus abolitionism. Would love to hear from you. If we really get 10,000, I won't have time to respond to them all, but I'll have fun trying. So go ahead and contact us at contactwokepedia@gmail.com. Anything else we need to say?
I just want to clarify again, we're in a bit of a phase transition as we move from the Wikipedia name for the podcast to the Enemies Within the Church name to make it a little bit clearer of our association between the two. So that email, we are still using the Contact Wikipedia, but we will be transitioning to a new email at some point, and we'll keep those kind of running simultaneously for a bit before we transition fully. But make sure that if this was useful to you, if this helped clarify the situation, that you share it with others who might need that clarification, especially Southern Baptists who are looking at things and questioning about, who should be running our convention, who should be, in charge, who should be making decisions on things. And even if I don't think that Bart is a liberal, I don't agree with him on this position, and I think it's unbecoming of the president of the Southern Baptist Convention to do something like this. I think it's a little bit underhanded. I think his responses are problematic. Share it. And if you have any sort of influence with Bart, you can let him know. He knows already, but let him know that we're willing to bring him on, run a comment from his, whatever it is. We're very curious to understand if there's any way outside of our explanation to understand how this makes sense. How this makes sense in any other way than unrepentant anger being unleashed in an attack on Bart. Now, I want to clarify one thing. We're not saying, especially considering that they misspelled his name, we're not saying that Larry Bush's campaign had Bart's permission.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case.
Probably not.
But it just shows that careless comments made in anger, there's a reason that repentance involves turning away from your sin, because if you leave it out there, it's going to end up hurting other people. In this case, it did.
That's right. Well, keep standing for the preborn.
And yet to be determined sign off. So until next time.